delighted to introduce today's presentation as part of the Dean's Innovative Leader Series. Today's presentation promises to be both unique and educational. We will hear from Mr. Anatoly Chubais, Chairman and CEO of Rusnano, which is a Russian nonprofit, state-owned nanotechnology corporation. I've actually spent this entire week with Mr. Chubais and some of his senior colleagues from Rusnano, and it is a fascinating business activity in Russia, about which you will hear. We will discuss the future of innovation and the modernization of Russia. Mr. Chubais will be joined for a discussion with our own Nubar Afeyan. Before I introduce our guest of honor, let me first remind you of our next presentation in this series. On April 21, Raymond Offenheiser, President of Oxfam America, will share with us how he has shaped corporate social responsibility and led U.S. foreign aid management strategy into the 21st century. As you may know, Oxfam has been particularly active lately in providing humanitarian aid to Haiti following the tragic earthquake earlier this year. So please save the date of April 21 to hear more from Ray Offenheiser. Now about today's presentation. As I have mentioned already, Anatoly Chubais is the Chairman and CEO of Rusnano, a $5 billion Russian nanotechnology investment corporation. Under his leadership, Rusnano is building a nanotechnology infrastructure in Russia through education, through research, and through business investments. President Dmitry Medvedev envisions that Rusnano will help to create technology centers of excellence and business incubators that will become Russia's Silicon Valley. President Medvedev also recognizes that an academic institution, a common gathering place for business leaders, scientists, and students to share knowledge and foster technology, is also needed for a truly high-tech region to evolve. To this effort, just last month, he announced that he had chosen the Moscow suburb of Skolkovo, home also to the Skolkovo School of Management, as the venue for this high-tech hub. And as you may know, last year, MIT Sloan partnered with Skolkovo, the School of Management, and this, we believe, no doubt played an integral role in the selection of this particular location for that activity. And to bring all of this together, Mr. Chubais was chosen to lead the development of this technology campus with financing from the Russian government's $340 million modernization and innovation budget. Mr. Chubais is no stranger to modernization and privatization. Indeed, he is recognized as one of Russia's strongest advocates for privatization in the post-Soviet time. A 2004 survey by PricewaterhouseCoopers and Financial Times named Mr. Chubais the world's 54th most respected business leader. Originally from Belarus, Mr. Chubais is a graduate of the Leningrad Institute of Economics and Engineering with a degree in economics. And today we are also fortunate to have our own Dr. Nubar Afeyan here as well to participate in the discussion with Mr. Chubais. As many of you know, Nubar is managing partner and CEO of Flagship Ventures and also a senior lecturer here at MIT Sloan School. He is a member of several advisory boards, including the Deshpande Center for Technological Innovation here at MIT, and the Whitehead Institute at MIT, and the Harvard-MIT Division of Health Sciences and Technology, and also a member of the advisory board of the Skolkovo School of Management in Moscow. A technologist, an entrepreneur, and a venture capitalist, Nubar Afeyan has co-founded and helped build over 20 successful life science and technology startups during the past 2 decades. Both he and Mr. Chubais have played important roles in the launch of the Skolkovo School of Management, and we are indeed fortunate they are both willing to share their thoughts with us here today. Now, the format of today's session will be as follows. We will first hear Mr. Chubais' presentation on the creation of a high-technology industry in Russia, and then Nubar Afeyan will lead a conversation with Mr. Chubais, and then finally I will open the floor for questions. And now would you please join me in welcoming Mr. Anatoly Chubais and Dr. Nubar Afeyan.
Thank you, Steve. Thank all of you for coming here today. I'm not sure that I'm well prepared to give lectures, because actually we come here to take lectures in MIT Sloan School. That's why I think that that not will be the lecturing, but there will be kind of conversation. And let me be quite brief in my starting presentation, starting remark, and then there will be the Q&A session. I myself and a team of my sitting here, that's Rusnano team, will try to answer your question. And I would probably start not from the Rusnano itself, but a little bit wider, if you allow me. I think that those of you who try to follow somehow Russia's development in the last years may know that the most frequently used word in Russia is the modernization. You will find it on internet, you will find it on TV, you will find it on radio, on speeches of the politicians, everywhere. And it really become one of the major political priority for the President Medvedev, for the Russian government. But at the same time, you may know that it's a lot of skepticism around this priority. And you will find a lot of people in Russia who are very, very skeptical about it, who consider that it's unrealistic and we are not prepared for it, and we should not try to make some strong steps. They have their own argument, and to put it clear from the very beginning, I disagree with them. There's a situation when I myself are deeply supporting this kind of goal, because I deeply believe that that is the real strategic, historical challenge for Russia. And that's why I myself and the whole team will try to do our best to be not just involved, but to become one of the major drivers of this policy. Being Rusnano, we definitely have to do it, and it's not something we just have to, that's something we want to do. So I will tell you about the Rusnano itself, and want you to understand that the Rusnano is just kind of the important piece of the general modernization activity of the Russian leaders, which has started just 1 year ago. Rusnano is a very young company. As you can see, we were founded in 2007, and the mission is to create the Russian nanotechnological sector. Our key performance indicator is very clear, unfortunately, and it's very easy to check, because we have to design the Russian nanotechnological sector, which will be able to have the annual revenue by 2015, which should be equal to 20 billion euro, $30 billion. So that's the target. That's the target, and we will be charged by the ability or not ability to achieve this target. We are designed to finance projects on the early stage and on the stage of the expansion. And one of the important principles in our financial strategy is that we are not going to control the businesses which we are supporting. So we are not going to become kind of the only Russian high-tech holding who will own all of the businesses all over the Russia connected with the high-tech. We believe that we are not to substitute private strategic investors, but to support private strategic investors. That's why we, in our project, normally owns less than 50% of ownership. It's not the issue of the numbers, that's the issue of the principle. We may finance not only the equity money, but the loans as well, and that's what we are doing in our financial strategy. The financial support which we are offering to our partners We normally may offer on quite attractive financial conditions, especially while the crisis was in the peak stage. We looked very attractive, which is not necessarily the same now. But nevertheless, we may offer the financial support for our partners. That's one of the basic principles which we are doing. Together with financial support, we are committed for non-financial support for our partners. We are able to help our partners in picking up the right regions in Russia, in arranging the regional, local governor support, in getting rid from the red tape, from the corruption, which is unfortunately still the case in a number of the projects. So that's our responsibility to help our partners to feel themselves in a friendly environment while they decided to invest in nanotechnology in Russia. On this slide, you may see the major business procedure within the company. So actually, what we are doing, we are getting application. By now, we have more than 1,500 applications, which, by the way, came from all over the world. It's not only Russian application. We have United States, about 40 or 50 applications, Israel, Finland, South Korea, Taiwan, Japan, Germany, so different countries. And those applications, that's the start for the expertise which we're making in the company. So this expertise kind of divided for two parts. That's the technical and scientific expertise, and that's the business expertise and business structuring of the project itself. This expertise is quite tough. You might find it just by the numbers. As I've told you, we have more than 1,500 applications and only 64 projects which is approved. That's the deal flow, which is the result of this expertise made within the country, and it's within the company. And on the technical and scientific side of our expertise, what is important that we use independent experts. They are not staff for Rusnano. They just prominent scientists from Russia, not only from Russia. We invite them to help us with the expertise for the project which we are making in Rusnano. There are the numbers which is just demonstrate what is already done in 2 years. In 2 years, we, as I've told you, approved 64 projects, and the total investment, total capex of this project is a little bit more than 5 billion euro. And we expect the consolidated revenue from those projects by 2015 about 3.5 thousand euro. That's something which now put it into the deal flow. What are the sectors we are dealing with? They're quite different, and in this slide, just some of them are demonstrated. That's the solar energy conservation. We are quite deeply involved in this sector. In photovoltaic, we have, if I remember correctly, more than 5 projects in solar cells, different technology which we are trying to support, starting from thin film technology and finishing with the arsenic gallium with the concentrators. In this thin film technology, what we are making is we are building quite a big company, quite a big manufacturing facilities, which should be built in Russia, in Chuvasia region. And we invested about, let me translate in dollars, about $700 million in this facility, in the partnership with the Russian, as always, in the partnership, in this case, in partnership with one of the Russian investor, Mr. Vekselberg, who is co-investing together with us in this facility. So we deeply believe that in this sector we have not only technological partners, but we have quite a good scientific background. We have a Russian Nobel Prize winner, Mr. Alferov, involved in the scientific backing of this project. And we will develop this solar energy industry in Russia. Nanostructured materials, that's one more dimension which we are supporting. We deeply believe that the nanocomposite materials nanostructured and nanocomposite materials may become very important suppliers for, first of all, space industry, then for the aircraft production industry. As we know, Boeing 787 has as many as 53 or 55% of the nanocomposite materials, which is demonstrate for me kind of irreversibility in the process of the titanium and aluminum substitution by the new materials in the aircraft producing industry. And just here in Sloan, when we get lectured, I asked Professor, what about the nanocomposite materials in car producing industry? And I've got quite a promising answer, which means that we will keep our efforts in developing this nanocomposite materials industry in Russia. Medicine and biotechnology. Several projects which we already invested, again, we just starting to do it. Maybe one concrete example I will give you, that is the project which we have developed, that is in the sector brachytherapy. The point of the project is that is the particles which may radiate. They put it into the capsules, microcapsules, and microcapsules with the blood may come to the exact those part of the body which need to be radiated. I'm not medical expert, so sorry for a little bit primitive way of explaining, but I believe in this technology. It helps people with the later stage of cancer, and it substitutes old-style chemotherapy, which is very, very harmful for the people. One more project in this sector, that's the project which we are doing with our partners from Dubna. In Dubna, we have quite a good scientific facilities with a long and good history with the accelerators. And what they suggested to us is the new technology when on those accelerators, elementary particles are making the holes in polymer, and the diameter of the hole is very small. It's less than 40 nanometer. And the polymer with those holes become very, very fine filter, which may be used in the modern blood filtering devices. And those blood filtering devices demonstrate very high efficiency. And we're now building the big manufacturing facilities to produce commercial product based on this technology. Mechanical engineering and metalwork, number of projects, just maybe one example. That's the technology when we take the cutting tools and cover them by the nano coating, and it increases the strength, and you don't have to sharpen them as frequently as before. Just in 2 weeks, we will open big manufacturing line in the city of Rybinsk in Yaroslav region with this technology. Optoelectronic. We deeply believe in optoelectronic, and we start from the light-emitted diodes. We start from maybe the easiest part of this technology, I mean non-organic light-emitted diodes. And we are building facility which will be put it into operation and produce commercial products since July this year. They will produce annually for 2 billion light-emitted diodes for the lighting system. And we believe that it will change the whole cluster of the lighting system everywhere. It's indoor, outdoor, that's the special system of lighting, that's the car lighting. So we would like to be involved in this sector. We support this kind of technology, and that sounds for us very promising. Infrastructure and education. Again, just one example what we are doing. We have had quite a big tender for building infrastructural facilities which we call nano centers. So we're going to build these nano centers to invest in each of them about $50 and $90 million. And this will be the facilities which will be equipped with the modern equipment, with the clean rooms, and the idea that they should they should give their premises for rent for the small and medium businesses who are not able to invest such a big money to build their own clean rooms. So we understand that that's a real demand in Russia. We understand that in some Russian more developed region, there are some medium and small-sized companies who would like to have this kind of facilities. And that's why we just announced 1 week or 2 weeks ago, we just announced the first result of the first tender. There will be 4 regions of Russia where we will build this kind of the nano center, which we consider important part of the infrastructure for developing nano industry in Russia. So that's just very brief review of the clusters which we are developing, and not to overload you by the numbers. That's just the strategy how Russian nano industry, which is actually do not exist now, should become the important and great part of the Russian GDP by 2015. That's the target we have to achieve. Just to finalize, again, we committed to this kind of the activity, and we would be happy if he and MIT would find a different type of partnership. The partnership in education, which we are doing as well, the partnership in research, which is not the most part of what we are doing, but nevertheless, the partnership in the new startups, which we are interested most, and the major task is to find startups which would be ready to enlarge their business to start to do something in Russia. So we would be happy to invest, to support, and to protect, and to develop this kind of project, probably with your help and your support. Thank you very much.
This thing is on and on. Okay, great. Well, that was fascinating, I'm sure, for all of you, as it was for me. Most of us grew up hearing about Russian revolutions, but today I think we heard about a Russian nano-revolution. It's a whole nother meaning that's taking place. And yeah, nano, that's right. That's the 21st century nano-revolution. And I think one of the things you touched on, and by the way, format-wise, we have till 1 o'clock or a little before 1, and we will have a discussion for the next 15 minutes or so, and hopefully pull some questions in. We're not going to have too much time, but think of some questions ahead of time, and we'll take a few. But you commented on this whole notion of, on the one hand, building out nanotechnology, on the other hand, building out an entrepreneurial and innovation ecosystem within Russia, and how these things play together. When we, around MIT, talk about entrepreneurship, we think big and act small, because these are startups. What you talked about is thinking small, relative to the technologies and acting big, which is the exact inverse. So I guess the first question I would ask for you is, I mean, you certainly showed the rationale for how you can get to 20 billion. But you're attempting something that is somewhat top-down, right? It's maybe top-down and bottom-up. How are you matching the kind of the challenges of a simultaneous bottom-up and a top-down strategy? How are you thinking about that?
That's the issue which is widely discussed in Russia, and I could even say that I was criticized by some experts, and one of them told me very, very pragmatic things. He said that, Mr. Chubais, do you really think that you may create the innovative economy by the decree of the president or prime minister? And I have to step down and said, no, it's impossible to create it by the decree, but the specific thing about Russia is that without the decree, you cannot create it in Russia as well. And one have to understand this very peculiar logic of the Russian, I don't know, Dostoevsky or what are the background in this thing, but that's the reality. That's the reality. I do believe that we should do exactly you said. We have to find very fine balance between top-down and bottom-up approach. And definitely we as Rusnano being funded by the government, not 5 billion, Stephen, we are not 5, we are 10 billion. Please correct it in your presentation. So being funded for $10 billion money, definitely we deal mainly with the sizable project. But we're not only one in the Russian designing ecosystem. We have Russian Venture Capital Fund, which is designed, that's fund of fund, you may know about it, who designed to create in Russian regions the private venture capital funds, who deal with much smaller project than we. And they announced the program for the seed and pre-seed funds, which is even smaller, as you know better than me. So I've just put you the part of the picture, but in the whole picture, at least what we're trying to create, that's exactly what you said, ecosystem, which consists from different institutions.
So just to talk a little bit more about entrepreneurship, and one of the other things I'm sure you're dealing with is you came from nowhere to now having $10 billion to invest. And at a global level, ideas and entrepreneurs usually who are starving for money will go to wherever the money is. And so one question when you have that much money is, how do you attract the best ideas instead of the ideas that can't get money other places? I know you worry about this. That's one. And second, how do you deal with the observation that the best, you're going to refer, that's right. So the second question related, and we've talked about these things, so I know you guys are dealing with this, is how do you deal with the clear observation that humans excel at innovating when they're resource constrained, when they're desperate, when they're struggling to survive? Then when you give those people $100 million, how will they still innovate, still take risks, still be desperate? How do you not defeat your own purpose in this regard with money?
Yeah, that's a very serious question. I maybe say just a few words, and then I ask a colleague of mine to help me in answering, because your question is too complicated. Please don't be so tough. So my belief is we really face exactly with the problem which you said. There is this small businessman in Russia who spent last 10 years with his own invention, which he little bit crazy about, and he dreaming of getting somehow, I don't know, $10,000. Suddenly we came and said, 10,000, it's not the size, we can give you 1 million, and it becomes crazy. Maybe we ourselves make these kind of mistakes because the demand for money is not adequate for the real potential of the project itself, real potential of the team. So that's the mistakes which we probably already make sometimes, but nevertheless, I believe that that's the inevitable mistake of the initial stage. We do understand that our goal is not to spend money, our goal is to create the industry. And all the motivation of the staff of Rusnano is based not on the number of projects, but on the future market capitalization of the industry which is developed. So that's why please allow us made our own mistakes, and then we'll try to correct them based on what you said. And I would ask Dmitry Lysenkov to help me in answering this question, if you can add something.
Yeah, actually, a bit of practice.
Dmitry.
Thank you very much. It's okay? So I'll speak on behalf of investment block of the corporation, which is the largest and I guess the most important. Basically, we didn't come from nowhere. That's the wrong thing to say, I would argue. And we have quite a background in Russia in technology, as you all know, and in doing great technology, space and even medicine and other areas. And we also not just separate country and world. We live in the environment, and we learn from that, actually. What we do here, we come here to learn. Also, what kind of achievements were made in the United States and what kind of mistakes were made. So we learn from it as well and try to apply it in what we do. And speaking about how we attract the companies which are not just, cannot find money anywhere else but with us. We go and talk, and we speak the same language, and we offer what we have. We have money, we have brains, we have educated people in different areas of science and technology. We have markets. We have fast-growing markets. We have great growth in consumption on industrial level and on the consumer level. So these all we can offer, and many other things. We have actually had a discussion with a company from MIT, and I was wondering also why such a great company with such great technology wants to come to Russia, and I got all the right answers. We have something to offer, and another thing that we also have experience in doing these deals. The guys who work at Rusnano, they came from the market, came from not only Russia, from different countries to work with such companies and to help companies not just to spend money, but to use them wisely and with our help. And I think that's worth something.
Great.
If I answer your question.
Now I'm disappointed, because first he said I asked a tough question, but with such a great answer, I don't think I asked tough enough a question. So now I'm a little disappointed. So so it's a great answer.
Thank you.
I mean, obviously I've interacted enough to know that there's a lot more, but I'm saying perception-wise, I mean, a lot of people in the room might have a perception, and so part of this is also how do you communicate your message. But just to talk about the couple of other quick things about the culture and the mindset, and I think you're basically innovating and changing a mindset, right? So in that regard, around MIT, obviously, there's this mindset of risk-taking and trying and failing. Of course, in the West Coast, there's also an effort there, which is quite developed. But the question is, when you think about this in Russia, both from a legal standpoint and from a practical kind of societal standpoint, how will society deal with failure? How will academics deal with failure? How will young entrepreneurs deal with failure? How is failure treated from a legal standpoint, and how is failure treated as to what happens to you next?
Well, that's the issue which we are discussing ourselves. And unfortunately, I have to say that we have no serious research made on this issue, which I would like to, but there is no serious research. That's why what I can tell you is just the feelings. And my understanding that there are some which helps in the Russian culture to the reasonable acceptance of the failure, something which is not. And if I may give some grades, I think if I compare Russia with the world, with the United States, with reminding me some criticism of my friend from the West Coast saying to the East Coast people, but I will not take it now. I can say that Russia, to my mind, is less acceptable for the failures than United States, but much more than France.
Great. Yeah, that's a good answer. We also pick on France, so it's okay. So just one more maybe directional question, and that is your own leadership. So you've done a lot of different things in your life. You've been in government, outside. You've done very large companies. You've really transformed a big chunk of Russian economy in the last 15, 20 years. But now you find yourself in this totally new organizational structure. You have to create a culture. You have to create processes and make mistakes and learn, etc. How do you think about your own leadership? And what type of leadership style you think will work for such a new entrepreneurial company like Rusnano?
Well, that's maybe a little bit personal question, but I'll try to answer. So to explain my personal role, first of all, I have to say that for the last 11 years, I am #1 in Russia in the list of the most hated politician. And there was one year when Mr. Zhirinovsky was #1. I was not sorry about it, which has definitely influenced for the leadership role somehow. But at the same time, if I try to take it more seriously, I can tell you that, you know, I have to be personal, so sorry. If I'm comparing this job with what I do before, let's say privatization in Russia, transformation of the energy industry, which I was involved, normally what we have around us is the very strong opposition. We always have the majority of the Russian political class, majority of the regional elite strongly against of what we do. And when I came to Rusnano, just according to the habit, first I have to do is to understand where are the enemies, who are against the modernization in Russia. Look at the communist, and I've got the Mr. Zyuganov statement that he is strongest supported modernization, but socialist modernization. I look at my friend Zhirinovsky, he is strong supporters of the modernization. I'm asking local governors, dozen of them, all of them supporting modernization. You will not find in Russia even a single politician or single regional leader who would say that I'm against modernization. It's a stupid idea. No, it's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. Another thing is that, I've told about it already, that it's a lot of skepticism. It's a lot of skepticism. If you will sit in front of the, I don't know, 10 Russian businessmen, 9 of them will say modernization, it's unserious. What they are talking about, what kind of modernization? There is no rule of law. Khodorkovsky in prison, the number of problems, the economy, efficiency is very low. Why are they speaking about the modernization? So skepticism is very widespread. But the opposition, no. Which for me and for the whole team means that we have a wonderful environment to start to really promote this kind of thing. So that's why, on the personal level, I find myself in much more comfortable situation than anyway in the last 20 years of my professional life.
Super, super. And then maybe one last thing, and then we're going to open it up to the audience, is just to think about, you know, obviously you're, as was mentioned, you're in a competitive environment because there's many countries trying to use innovation as a competitiveness tool, and at a time when other economies are growing very rapidly, and we hear obviously a lot about BRIC countries, etc. And so, and some of them have gotten ahead a little bit, and some of them don't have quite the resources you have in Russia in terms of academia. How are you thinking about the competitive positioning of a Russian future innovation entrepreneurial system versus what China may be able to develop, what India may be able to develop, let alone France? But I mean, just kind of, you know, just kidding. But you know, how do you think of your most, you know, your comparables, let's say?
Well, first of all, if we take the Russian economy as the whole, it's unfortunately very low level of competitiveness within the Russian economy, and that's something which is definitely undermine the entrepreneurial activity and the efficiency of the economy, and that's the basic problem. But at the same time, if we take this problem not on the very, very macro level, but on a little bit more pragmatic level, we are making our project, let's say, I don't know, the light-emitted diodes. So what we are going to produce is the light-emitted diodes with the efficiency lumen per watt, which is on the level of the best producers in the world, including Cree, who else, кто там еще производит? Philips, Osram, yeah, they produce. And so the efficiency of the light-emitted diodes we are going to produce is definitely on the world level or even above than the world level. And what we do understand that all the businesses which we are creating should not be just Russian domestic local industries. It would be stupid. There is no way to have the Russian light-emitted diodes locally, which is closed from the world, and hope that you will, by protectionist steps, protect this market for the decade. It does not work. So we should do or the either the best technologies in the world or nothing. And that's the ideology, that's the mentality we try to support with our partners. And in all of the projects which we're developing, we definitely consider the potential expert. What the share of expert? 20%, 50%, 90%. Very good. Some of the projects which we're developing are unfortunately, 100% export-oriented. Unfortunately, I said because I thought about the photovoltaics, about this thin film project we're developing, and I know that unfortunately in Russian energy sector there is no still special supporting system for the alternative energy, and I know that photovoltaic in Russia will not be developed till the moment government will finally decide to support the system. But we're already building the plant, and we believe that it will be oriented for an export. So that's why the competition for Russian innovative sector, there will be the worldwide competition. Otherwise, it doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm. Great. Questions from the audience? Why don't we get a show of hands? Please, go ahead. They wait for the microphone. And
yes. My name is Sergey. So I have a question about modernization. Basically, how do you think about the balance between the social stability that is apparently very important for Russian government and the modernization, which basically leads to increase of productivity, new technologies, and layoff of a lot of people? So do you see this as a conflict of like two ideas, and what's the solution in your view?
Well, I'm absolutely agree with you that it's not that easy. And that is the real conflict, which is sometimes just need to be a little bit deeper, you immediately see. Let me give you an example. AvtoVAZ, Russian car producer, who is not in the best shape now and who's producing not the best car in the world. And they are in a very, very complicated situation. And what we can see, the governmental decision, to give them money just for paying their debts, then to give them money for supporting the industry. It's not the money for modernizing AvtoVAZ itself, but that's the money for keep social stability. They have 110,000 employees, and definitely they cannot allow them to go in the street and demonstrate immediately. So that's the kind of example which is in this balance, which you was absolutely right, balance between social stability and modernization, weight to social stability. But at the same time, what is encouraging me is that in the most of the project we are doing, that's the new technology. It's not only new technology, that's the new sectors, like optoelectronic, it doesn't exist in Russia. Photovoltaic, it doesn't exist in Russia. And in these new sectors, there is no, at least direct competition between the modernization and the social stability. Definitely, we do understood that by developing the Russian optoelectronic sector, we will suppress the Russian traditional lamp production. But it's indirect connection, and until now I can see that it's a lot of support. So the answer for your question is not black and white. There are some pros and contrasts, and what is encouraging is that on the new sector we definitely have this support, and that's the way how to keep this balance on the reasonable position.
please.
You ended your presentation with saying, we are hoping for your help. Please don't. I was just wondering, why should we help you? And what is in it for us except creating our own competition?
It's a good question. The easiest answer is very simple. Money. If you don't need them, don't help. It's up to you.
Yeah, I would just add a little bit to that. I think your question is obviously related to Rusnano per se, your answer. But there's also, MIT, as you've heard, MIT is involved in a partnership with Skolkovo, which Mr. Chubais is also quite involved with. They're trying to improve the infrastructure to think about these things, and I think there is an interesting long-term benefit for U.S. academia, U.S. centers of innovation to establish contacts and relationships, flow of people, flow of expertise, because getting into these markets 20 years after they're created proves to be a little difficult. And so another attractant to getting involved and sharing expertise is the familiarity, the relationships, and I think that over and beyond the Rusnano angle is quite beneficial. And I'm not speaking on behalf of MIT, but I know that MIT has done this in India, has done this in China, and by being in quite early and having the right relationships has benefited long term and being able to really foster this type of a global entrepreneurial and innovative ecosystem and spreading it. And I think that's a big benefit. That's partly what drives us.
Absolutely, I can just support from my meeting in MIT this time and previous time. What I even surprised about is the enormous will to start to cooperate with Russia. And that is something which I myself can see, and there was the quite unique group of the Russian top governmental officials 2 or 3 months ago who feel the same from the professors, from the deans, from the leadership from the MIT. And I can tell you that in Russia, MIT, that's not just one of the universities. That's something which has very symbolic meanings. MIT, that's something which is equal to the innovation economy, if I may say so. So that's why I do believe in this kind of cooperation deeply, but if you don't, believe in money.
Next question. Go ahead, please.
Hi, my name is Sergei Arkhipov. I'm dual degree MIT and Harvard. Rusnano is definitely the government arm, and I understand to which degree you have your own agenda and leverage with respect to improving the factor conditions in Russia. Let's say Russia has been ranked, I guess, 120 country in the world in terms of easiness of doing business there. And recently at the Michael Porter class, we had a case about the Costa Rica, and the president of Costa Rica told a story. Then they approached Intel, and Intel asked how long does it take to clear the goods in the customs, and Costa Ricans told like 20 days, and Intel requested 2 hours, and Costa Ricans in the end improved the conditions, and Intel built the fab. So to which degree you have the same proposals to the Russian government to improve the factor conditions in Russia, and what's your priority number 1?
Well, I think that the patent and even maybe wider the atmosphere or the conditionality for the development business in Russia and innovative business especially currently are very poor and very bad. And that is what we do understand. No doubt about it. And we do understand that improve this conditionality, not only in patenting, not only in the intellectual property protection, but for the developing innovative businesses in the country. That's definitely one of the most important directions. And it's not something which may be done in 1 month. But nevertheless, I can tell you what we are doing as Rusnano in this field. First, we already finished our work, which based on the number of discussions with the Russian innovative company, when we asked them what is the most irritating barrier you faced in your real business practice. I was surprised by the answer. I didn't know it, and most of them said that's the custom. It's absolutely impossible to export some prototype or to import some chemical materials or things like this for the custom to export 1 million grain is the same what is the export of, I don't know, the prototype of the microphone, something like this. And that's why we invite the experts, and we made a big job for making the big project which we call Green Corridor. That's the complex of amendments in the Russian Custom Code, in the Russian law for the export regulation, and the Russian law of the money flow. So the complex of the legal issues which should be transformed to help for the innovative companies to fill their product in a green corridor. First step. Second step, it's now under the governmental consideration. Second step, taxation. We do understand that the whole Russian taxation system were designed for the industrial economy, but we are going to build post-industrial economy. So that's why we prepared a number of amendments to the Russian tax code, starting from the, how it will be in English, the capital gains tax, which should be cancelled in Russia. and finishing with the special deduction in the personal income tax for the business angels. So it's a number of the amendments which we're developing, and we discussed it with Finance Minister Mr. Kudrin, and you would not believe, but it looks like finally they accept it. And we are now on the final stage of the transforming it. The same should be done with a number of the major Russian legislation subsystem, such as intellectual property protection, and that's what we're doing exactly now, such as the immigration legislation, such as the corporate legislation and creating something like GPLP in the Western legislation, and so on and so forth. So it's a number of the legislation which is transforming now. That's the ongoing process. We try to be involved in it.
So I think we're gonna have to stop the questions. Let me just say a couple of words, and then Steve will conclude. So I think this is a series called the Dean's Innovations Leadership Innovation Series, and I think what you've heard is certainly the voice of an entrepreneur of a different kind. And we've heard a lot about skepticism. Some of the questions embody skepticism, which is a great thing. And I think you all realize that skeptics drive entrepreneurs, because when you're told you can't do something, that gets you to want to do it even more. Mr. Chubais is trying to do it at a country level, at a whole economy level, and he realizes that what he's doing is highly unlikely to succeed, but my guess is that's why he's doing it. And so at a place like MIT, let's thank him for that.
So I just like to say, yes, as a place like MIT where we believe so deeply in technological innovation and the impact of this type of entrepreneurship, it's a real privilege to have a visionary and a leader from Russia come to speak about it here. Rusnano is an ambitious activity, but it's a tremendously important activity. So I'd like to thank Mr. Chubais, and I'd also like to thank Nubar Afeyan for the remarks today.
That was great. That was great.